Welcome to Macrocode. If you're new to this channel, consider subscribing. So today we are going to cover something interesting in .NET Core. So that is EF Core migrations. So we are going to deal with EF Core migrations today. And most of you guys, if you have been following our videos, you have actually been able to see what we have been doing, interacting with the databases and actually doing migrations in EF Core. So what is it? So when it comes to migrations, so this actually is a very important topic when you are dealing with .NET Core applications. So using migrations is actually a standard way to create and update databases with actually Entity Framework Core. So the migration process has two critical steps. So that is creating migrations and applying those migrations. But to actually get to understand this kind of activity, we will actually begin with creating a model. So I'll just start with creating a model here called, let's just create a model called, so let's have a folder called models. Then I'm going to create a model here called student so that you also understand as to why we use migrations and what it actually helps. So once you have this model, I want us to have some few properties. So I'll just click, so I'll just do public int ID. So then you can have some properties here. We can say the first name string. So you can do here string first name. So this is the first name of the student, and you can actually do this equals to string.empty. So if you do that, so you can do string.empty, or instead of doing this, you can actually remove this, and here you can do this. So then we can have the middle name. Then you can have our last name. So we're going to have some few properties. Then you can say here maybe date of birth. So this is our date of birth. I'm going to have here date of birth. So then here we'll say date of, so we can do DOB. So let's just do DOB. So the DOB. So these are some of the properties that we have. So to actually create migration, so we'll need some few items. One, we'll need to create our DbContext. So I'll just go here and create another folder. Then I'm going to call this application DbContext. So we can say that is our folder. Then you can say here student. So let's create a class called student DbContext. So you can call it this student DbContext. Then you're going to have our DbContext here. But before that, we need two important NuGets. So if you right click on our project, then manage NuGet packages, then you're going to have two important NuGets. That is EF Core. So that is the Entity Framework Core. So then we can install that. So just install that. So there we go. Then you also need another one, that is Entity Framework Core.tools. So install that as well. And we can also install the SQL one. So install the SQL Server one. So this is the third one. So I'm going to install that. So we have some very important commands when dealing with EF Core, and that is the add migrations, update database, remove migrations. So you're going to see how those actually what they entail. So on our application DbContext, we can actually inherit DbContext. So we'll just do DbContext. So if you do that, you can actually import using Microsoft Entity Framework Core. So if you do that, then you will be able to see our using here. Then we now have, we need our constructor here. So I'll just do CTO. Then we'll have our constructor here. So for this constructor, we'll need our DbContext options. So we just need our DbContext options. Then we can have our student. So we can have our student DbContext. Then you can call this option. So you can call this option. Then here we can, here we can do something just outside our brackets. We can do this, then you can say options. So to have, so this should be the same name as this one. So ensure you have the same name there. So that is okay. So what we need to do now, let me try to zoom it a bit. I think that is okay. So what we need to do now, remember we have our student class. So this is our student, this is our identity, this is our foreign, that is our primary key, first name, middle name, last name, then we have the date of birth. So you can maybe have these as not nullable. Then we can, within our student DbContext, we can also do something. We can say here protected. So we can do protected override. So we can actually override void. Then we say on model creating. So we use that. So this is what we need. So here we can actually specify and we say on this model builder. So I'm going to say here, let me just do here, we'll say model builder. So let me just do model builder. You can actually do model builder dot entity. So I can say dot entity, then I can pass my student model there. Then I can close that. Then I can also do here, so I'll say builder equals to, then I can open brackets. So inside this builder, I can say here builder dot to table. So I can say to table, then I can provide the name of the table. So I can put it that way. Just I do here that way. Then I can say here students. So I can say students. Then here I can do comma. I can say table builder. I can just call table builder. Table builder. Then I can also have this as equals to. Then I can also open brackets. So inside here, I can say table builder dot, I can say has, maybe check constraint. So that check constraint, I can actually see if, I can see here, assuming we have, we can actually add, assuming on our student, we can add age. So you can say here, an int. So you can have an int, say int, and you can say age of a student. So that age on our student DbContext, you can actually check constraint here, and you can say, you can put it into bracket. Sorry. So I can say into brackets. Then here I can actually provide that check constraint, and I say check constraint student underscore age. Say not age above, let's say age above 1. So that will be our constraint. Then if we do that, so if I do here comma, then I can say here SQL. Then I can do, so I can do full colon that. Then I can always say name of, then I can do student, then dot age. So that age should always be greater than 1. So if I do that, then I can now close this. So then here I can do that, can close it, then we can also close this. So these are some of the updates that you can do. And also what we have been doing, you can always do here, in case you have different tables, you can always do public dbset. So this will actually create our student table, and you can then provide the name of the of the table. So in assuming you remove this, it will actually remove that particular table within our database. So that is some of the things that you need to be aware of. And also here, when we have this particular query here, within our builder inside here, we can actually say builder dot has key. So you can actually specify the key. You can say has key, and you can say the key is actually, you can say key is equals to p.id. So that is our key. You can also check it in case you want to check the maximum number of characters. You can also maybe copy this down here. You can say property. That particular property you say p dot first name. So that first name should be actually has a maximum character of maybe as a maximum length. So you can see has a maximum, as maximum. You can always define that as maximum, then you provide the value. Say it should not exceed 100 characters. You can do the same for the other properties. For example, the middle name. You can do also for the last name. So this is actually we are having some constraints and checking some of the validations here. Then also you can also do maybe you say the first name, or assuming we have our student, within our student we have an ID number. So if I just do here and I say this is an int, and I can say this is ID number. So I can always say I want every student within our database to have a unique ID number. So I'll just come to my DbContext and I can do here, property ID number, and I can say it's actually unique. So I can say is, so if I just do is unique, is unique. So that is unique. So if I just do that, then so this is so I can do that way. Sorry. So you can say is unique, and I can do that way. So this should be has index. So you can say has index, then ID number is unique. Then the next thing also is assuming I want to always ensure that my ID is actually required. So I can actually say here property, and I can say ID number is, so I can say is required. So that ID number should never be empty. So as you can see, we have been able to define some of these items, and you can see some of the validations that we've been able to do. So the to table here, if you just want to see if the to table here configures the table name for the specific entity, you see here, it is actually mapping that to students table. And actually this will have done the same thing. So it allows us to provide the table builder delegate. So we can use it to configure a check constraint, and you can see here we have actually done as check constraint and has key. So the has key here configures the table's primary key, which we have actually picked the ID. The has property represent the entry point for configuring the individual property of the entity. Then the has index defines the index on the specified property. We can also declare that that index should only be unique by calling the unique method. So once we have this, you can actually specify some items. So here, if you do this, you can actually add migration. So if you come here, there are very important commands that we actually need to be aware. So one of them is add migration. So if you just do add migration, this will actually generate the migration file. So you can see, if you see, I've just typed in add migration. So each of the migration name that you are adding should always, each of the migration that you are adding should always have a name. And an important thing to note is whenever you are adding migration, it should actually be simple migrations. Don't create a whole project, then run the migration. You'll have challenges troubleshooting in case there's anything that went wrong, and even reverting. So the best way is actually to ensure that every time you create maybe a table or even some properties has been altered, then generate a migration file for that. So then the migration names should always be specific to what you have done. So for example, you can see the name here. We can say added students table. So if that migration name should actually even guide the person who is who will be supporting the project and even maybe doing something else. So see students table. So they'll be able to know that this migration was actually meant for students table. So if I press enter, then our migration will be generated. So you can see the migration is being generated, and it will generate a folder here on our side. So you'll be able to see there is a folder that will be generated, and that particular folder will now have all the migrations that we've done. So there's something here which is very important. You can see unable to create a DbContext of type that. So that means we need to add it on our program.cs. That is our migration, our application DbContext. So before adding the migrations and checking some of the commands that we need to do, so what you need to ensure you have is you have these properties that you have done here. Then you also have your table. So you see we have the students model, and this will be our table name. So this table name, you can actually provide the name of how you will want your table to look like. So it doesn't mean that it you can say maybe can provide some names that you want, maybe say all students or something. But what is usually encouraged is your model name should actually represent your table name, then the table name should be in plural. Then the next thing that we need to do is now ensure that our program.cs file, we have our application DbContext registered. So one thing that you need to do here is actually you do builder.services, add DbContext, then students DbContext that you've just created here. Then on our program.cs, then we need to use our SQL server. Now connecting this to our database, then this connection string, all the database connection strings are actually done on appsettings.json. So you can see this is the connection string default connection. You provide the server name, the employee, that is the database name. Trusted server, trusted connection is true, then trust server certificate is true. Then you can also allow multiple active result sets. So the connection string will actually give us the default connection, which is part of the app settings. So the app settings will now give us this is the default connection, and that is what will be used to connect to our database. So after you have all this, what you need to ensure is we have the database already defined, and you can always do any constraints that you have or set some of the properties and validations here. Then once you have that, the next thing is you can actually now go and check the commands that you've been talking about. So if you go to NuGet Package Manager console, then you can add migration. So this is one of the important commands that we usually use. So add migration, then you provide the name of the migration. So the name of the migration should be actually concise, and should also tell the person who is actually looking on that particular file on what was done. So here we'll say added students table. So this is what this migration is doing. So if I press enter, it will actually generate this particular file. And if you open, you'll be able to see what it has done. It has created a table, a folder called migrations, and you have the add table migration file. Then you can see here, we have two methods. So we have the up and down. So the down one is actually dropping the table if it exists. Then the up one is actually creating our table. You can see it's creating the table students with the ID, first name, middle name, last name, a date of birth, age, and number. So if you just see some of these columns, you'll note that it is actually applying some of the constraints that we had. So you see it is actually checking first name, maximum length is 100, middle name, maximum length is 100, last name, and you can also see ID number, nullable is false, so it is actually required. Then you can see our check constraint that we added. So it is checking if the age is above 1, and you can also see it has created our index for the ID. Then that is it. So if you want to apply this to the database, you can always apply this to the database. So to apply this to the database, you can now do another command called update database. So if you update the database, this will actually now create this table. It will create all these table to now the database that we've just created. So if I just maybe to showcase what is happening, let me just maybe create a table, a sample table, so that you see what happens. But for those who are watching this channel for the first time and you like the video, comment down below and subscribe to our channel. So this is one of the ways on how you can now update the database directly from EFCO. So I'll just create a sample table. Then we can actually link or update the database so that we see if those particular tables will be created without any hassle. So let me just connect. So I'm going to create a sample database, and we can call this a new database. Then we can call it migrations. So I'm going to call it migrations. So if I just do that, so you can see we have my table here. I don't have any, that is my database. I don't have any tables. So if I go to my app settings, I can actually now change this to migrations. So this will be my table name. So if I just click update database, our table name will be added. That is the student table will be added to the migrations database. So there is a sum of the tables that will be created. So let's just go and see what will be created in our database. So that is one of the table that will be created, and there is another table that is actually tracking the migrations. So you can see there is something here, a network-related instance of car established. So here it says we did not found or was not verified that the instance. So let me just check. So this is the name. Confirm our database name. So this is the, yes, so that is the issue. We replaced the wrong part. So this is the server. The database name should be migrations. So you should always check the server and the database name. So if we just clear this, so and we can now run the update database command. If everything goes well, you'll be able to see that our database has been created. And if you're keen with the commands here, you'll see that it is actually generating some statements. You can see create table, students, ID, first name, middle name, last name, date of birth, age. And you can see the constraints that it is actually applying. Check age should be greater than 1 and the rest. So if you go to the database, we'll find there are some two tables. One of the table is actually the student table that we have, and that table is actually now the students table with all the fields, the ID, first name, middle name, last name, date of birth, and ID number. Then we have now our migrations table. So this migrations table tracks all the migrations that you have done. So you can see this is the first migrations that you've done, and you can see our EFCO version is 8.06. So this is the migration file that we already added. So assuming we want to update something on our model. So assuming we introduce something like a phone number, which is so we can say, so we want to introduce something like phone number. So instead of, so the next thing that we need to do is also to add the migration. So I'll just clear this. So I'll just add migration, and this migration, I can say added student phone number. So if I press enter, it will also generate another migration file, which will only be adding the student phone number. You can see it is adding a column called as phone number in our table called student, and it will be dropping in case there is anything that has been created. So to update that file to our database, I'll just run update database. Then it will actually update that particular column in our database. So the next thing, if you go to our students table, you'll notice there's a column now called phone number. And on our migrations, we have now another second migrations that has been updated. So we have our second migration called added student phone number. So what happens if, assuming we have done something wrong, we didn't want to add this column. So if I want to undo that, I'll just come here, do clear, then I can say remove migration. So I'll just say remove migration. So if I just say remove migration, so it will remove the recent migration that it had already been done. But you can see the migration has already been applied to the database. Revert it and try again. If the migration has been applied to other database, consider reverting its changes using a new migration instead. So the only way you can remove the migration is when you have not added this particular, if you have not updated the database. So, but for now, we've actually updated the database. So what happens if you want to override this? So we'll just come to our model. I'm going to remove this. That is, I'll remove the field that I've just added. Then go back to our NuGet Package Manager console, clear here. Then I'll add another migration. So this migration will now be the one to help me. So I'll say remove student, removed student form number. So I'll say removed student phone number. So if I just say removed student phone number, it will now remove the migration. That is, you see, it is actually dropping the student phone number, and this was what we had done. So it's actually doing vice versa. So if I just update the database, I can update the database and our column will be removed. So if you go back to our database, you'll now see that under our students table, we don't have the migration, that is the phone number column. But on our migration history, we can be able to track what was done. So you'll be able to see we had added a student, we added phone number, then we removed it. And that's why it's very important for you to ensure that the migrations names are actually correct based on what you did. So when are we using then the remove migration command? So assuming we now return our phone number, we can add the migration again. So every time you change anything on the model, then you need to add the migration. So I can also say added student phone number. So added student phone number. So if I just do added student phone number, you can see it will not allow me to do that. Reason being, the added student phone number is already a migration name. So if you check on our models, that is our migration folder. We have added student phone number as a migration file. So we need to provide it a different unique name. So you'll not be able to be reusing migration names. So added student phone number, second time. So if I just do that, that will be now a unique migration name and it will create. So you can see this migration name has been created. And if you check on our migration folder, we'll be having added student migration name for the second time. So before I update the database, I can actually remove this migration name, assuming I did something wrong before even updating the database. So I can now reuse the remove migration command. So if I just do remove migration, it will remove the migration, that is the recent added migration. So if I just do that, you can see if you just go to our folder, you'll not be able to see that particular file. So that particular file has been removed. So we can now re-add, and if we add it to the same name, it will accept because it had been removed. So you can see it has been added again, and we now have it. But that is only if you have not updated the database. But if you just update the database, so if we just update the database, then our column will be added. If you try to remove the migration, then you'll have the challenges. So that is how you do that. So this is when you are doing something on production, and maybe you can actually reach your database via the locally. So you can reach your database locally, assuming you are working with a client who their server cannot be accessed outside their network, or you cannot actually connect directly using a public IP. So how do you then move the changes that you have on your database to the server or production environment? So that is now when we need to check something whereby we need to generate the migration scripts. So assuming that we have all these changes and we have created a database in the server and we don't have all these changes, how do we then move these changes to the database? So what we need to do is actually we can script the migration. So we'll just say script migration. Then you can provide the name of the migration, or even if you don't provide the name of the migration, if I just press enter, then it will actually give me all the migrations that you've just done. But you can also choose a certain duration, or maybe you want a migration from a certain point to a certain point. So you can see we have all these migrations. So you can see these are the changes that has happened to our database. So we see create table EF migration, and these are the columns. Then we have student, these are the columns that has been created. Then you can see I tried to create an index. Then we added this particular value. Then we altered the table, added the phone number. Then we also alter the table. We drop the phone number at some point. Then we also added this. You see all these migrations values are being added. So all these are some of the changes that you can actually now copy. And if you go directly to the database, so let me just show you something. If I just delete this, table, and I also delete, let me just delete, assuming now we are migrating this to the database, that is to the production environment where these changes were not there. So assuming the tables were not there, so if you can see, I don't have any table on my database. So if I just paste those commands here, you see these are some of the commands that I've just generated from my script migration. So if I execute, it will actually be able to do everything that we had created. So if I refresh, I'll have my two tables also with the values of the migrations. So if I just refresh my database, I'll have all my values. So this script migration actually gives us all the migrations that the changes that you have done to our database. So let me just refresh. You can see this is the EF migrations. So we already have all the values that we had inserted. So let's just see. You see it has all the migrations. Then for our database under students, we now have our columns with the phone number. Remember, we've been dropping and adding, so we have all the columns already there. But assuming I don't want to get all these migrations from the start to an end, so I can actually specify where I want to start my migration script. So let me just clear this. So assuming I just want to check, I just want to script my migration from a certain point. So I'll say migration. Then I only want to script my migration from this particular, when I added the second phone number. So I'll take the name of the migration and actually paste it here. So script migration added student phone number. So if I just press enter, it will only give me the migration for that particular point. So you can see this is the start point. But for me to get the start point, I should actually get the previous one. So this is the remove migration. So if I want to get the added student phone number, I should actually check the previous value. So that is the name of the migration. So the script, so let me just show you something. So if I do script migration, so this is the start migration, where the migration name should start. So if it starts here, then the next one, you remember it is added student phone number second time. So then it will actually give us the next migration going forward. So you can see now we have the alter student phone number add. So it has given us the next migration only for the added student second time. And you can see the file is a bit small compared to the other one. So we only have this particular section. So if you want maybe within the database, maybe from the added student table to remove a phone number, then you can actually do that. So how do you do that then? So you can actually come here, then you say added script migration. You start from added student phone number. So this will be our start migration. So you just come here, sorry. So you just come there, then you just have, so you do added student table start to. So this is the start and this is the end. So if you press enter, it will start from the added student table to the removed student phone number. So you can see it is actually generated from a certain migration file to a certain migration file. So that is how you generate, and this is how now you copy these particular commands and you go with them to production and you execute them. So instead of actually, remember, if in case you are not accessing these, maybe the database from your machine or even from somewhere, so you don't have to worry. So that is how you can execute those particular commands and execute them on the production environment. So those are some of the important things that I wanted us to cover today on EFCO. So the next thing that you can also do is actually do something called seeding. So you can seed data, and you can always have some primary data or even data that when you start the application, it already inserts. So how do you do that? So if you come to application DbContext, you can actually seed some data from here. So here I can actually, from here I can do something. So I can say model. So I can say model.entity, then builder. So then I can also come here and say builder. So I can also say builder.has data. So has, you can see this has data. So I can actually specify the values of the students. That is the default value. So I can say new student. So if I just say new student, then I can do here, I can open the brackets. Then I can now specify the value. So I can say ID of the student maybe will be GUID. So I'll say GUID.new GUID. So if I just do that, then this will give me the name of the student. Then the next thing that I can do is the name, the first name. I can say, so this is actually an integer. So I'll just do 1. Then I can say this is John Mwangi. So I'll say here this is John Mwangi. And I can also do the middle name. So sorry. So I can do the middle name. Say middle name. The first name should actually be John. The second name should be Mwangi. Then I can say the last name. The last name should be, can say Opio. So you can say here Opio. Then we can always say ID number. So you need to put in a comma. So you can say ID number is, so you can say here 1, or you can say 21. Then we can always say also the date of birth. Date of birth. You can say date time. So this is date time. Date time. Dot now. So that is how you seed the data. So the next one is the age. You can say here age. I can say the age should be, say the age should be 30. Remember, we had a constant checking whether it's above 1. So if we do that, you can see we now have our student. But this student of ours, we can actually have this student. So you can say new student. Then I can come here. So you can come here and actually do, so I'll just do another one. So I'll say comma. You see that? So if I do this, I'll be having, so I'll copy this here. Then I can also have it here. So you see, I have my second student, and I can say this is 23. I can say this is 23. I can also copy this. So I can have this. So if I do that, then I can say this is our ID here should be, let's just say 1, 2. Can say this is 3, and this is 25. This is 30. Say 30. So these are some of the data that we have. So what happens if, so I can say this is John 1. So we are seeding data now, John 2, and this is John 3. So if I add migrations, let's just see what will happen. So if I just do here and I say add migration, then I'll call this seeding data. So I'll call it seeding data. So if I press enter, it will also generate a migration file. And let's just see what will happen with that migration file. So it succeeded. You can see seeding data. It is actually inserting the data to our database. So you can see it is trying to insert. So it's inserting data to students, column ID, age, date, and these are the values that it's actually inserting. So that is the values, and you can see it is trying to delete any data that is there within our database. So if you try to update the database, you can do update database. So it will actually insert those values to our tables. So we've actually seeded the data. You can see everything is okay. If we go now to our student table, select our student table, so we should be able to see that we have some data from our application. So we've not created a UI maybe to insert data, but you can see we've seeded some data, and you can see we have the values. So you can see we have the ID number, but the phone number was not provided. So what happens if we go to the programs, that is the application DbContext, then we try to change and add now the phone number. So let's add the phone number. So we say phone number is 0712345. So we just play around with that. We also add this. So this is a comma, and we also add this. So let's see what will happen. So if we add the migration, remember we had added the data. So what happens if we try to update the data? So we can say add migration, update seeded data. So you can say this is seeded data. So if you press enter, let's see the migration file that will be generated. So you can see the migration file that will be generated. It is updating the data. So it is updating the data with the key ID, providing them with the new values. So you can see it is actually updating. So if we press, if we update the database, it will update our tables. So press enter, and we'll be able to see that our table has been updated with now the phone numbers. So if I just press here, we'll be able to see our phone numbers has been updated and the date of birth has been updated. So it is not actually inserting. So those are some of the things that you can do with EFCO migrations, and some of the things that you can actually achieve whenever you are doing that. So I'm going to leave it there for today. In case you are interested with this video, like, comment down below, and see you in our next video. Bye.